Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I do want to thank Sue Chittum, your wonderful, wonderful principal, and your assistant vice principal, Renee Stout, for welcoming the Not My Child team to the school this evening for the evening presentation of Not My Child, but also today for the student assemblies. Your 11th and 12th graders participated in a student-moderated Not My Child conversation, and your moderators were the performing and visual arts students. They did a terrific job. You should be very proud of them. So my name is Nancy Schrum, the Director of Constituent Services in the Office of County Executive Steve Shue. The Not My Child team is pleased to be here at Annapolis High School to share the county executive's and his administration's commitment to educate and inform students, parents, families, and community of the opioid and heroin epidemic plaguing our communities. Loving, caring, protective parents likely do not know the traits that put a child at the highest risk for addiction. No one would expect an academically high achiever, well-behaved child engaged in extracurricular activities to one day use heroin just to exist from day to day. So tonight, as the panelists share the teenage distraction and choices that are life-threatening, please consider this. Could your child be lonely, anxious, impulsive, or on overload from today's expectations for our teenagers? Do you understand the numerous unhealthy, socially accepted distractions available to teenagers today? Do you have a family member actively managing an addiction with prescribed medications, or is a family member scheduled for a medical procedure where an opioid will be prescribed as follow-up treatment for management for their pain? This evening, we will engage in an open and honest conversation on the destruction of lives and families through a loved one's use of drugs and addiction. The Not My Child panelists are here to share how substance abuse changes the brain health, and I say that, the brain health of the people we love. The conversation also includes prevention, who to call for help, and the role of law enforcement. It's extremely important that we all digest and accept the supply of drugs are in our communities. Crimes are being committed, and the death will continue until everyone takes personal responsibility to understand addiction. The whys and the hows, with the goal is no new users. Our hope is that tonight's discussion sends an alert to you and your family regarding the misuse of illegal and legal prescribed drugs and choices teenagers are making in the name of fun. Again, our goal is to provide awareness with a focus on prevention with the full intent that families avoid the disease called addiction. So to get this conversation going, I'm very pleased to introduce to you Keith Mills. I think everybody knows Keith's names. He's a sportscaster for WBAL TV, born and raised here in Arundel County, very, very involved in our youth sports programs across the county and high school athletics. So please welcome Keith.
Nancy, thank you so much. Thank you for coming. I'll echo what Ms. Chittum said. It is crucial that you're here. We're happy you're here. And I guarantee you when you leave tonight, our esteemed panel, some of the most poignant, emotional, powerful things you'll hear will come from the men and women to my left. And then when we're done meeting them and hearing their introductory statements, you will be able to take the floor and engage in conversation with them and hopefully have all your questions answered when we leave tonight. Not My Child. Think of the name. Think of the connotation of the name, right? Not my child. Man, it could be yours, but certainly not mine. Well, that might have been the case maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but not now. Because as Nancy said, Ms. Chittum said, we heard on the powerful video just a few minutes ago, narcotics, heroin, opiates, are killing our kids. Man, they're killing them every day. And this is why we're here. I have had the privilege and the honor to get to know many of these people being on this Not My Panel program that Nancy and Steve Shue, the county executive, have put together. And as I mentioned, they are incredibly wise and incredibly experienced in dealing with this. This could also be called, it could happen to you, because it happened to me about 15, 16 years ago. I fought my own battle with opiates. Fortunately, it didn't escalate into heroin. I was addicted to a painkiller called hydrocodone. It overcame my life. It eventually led to my arrest, my dismissal at the old TV station I used to work in, Channel 2. Now I work at Channel 11, thanks to the kind people who gave me a second chance. Not to mention the humiliation, the embarrassment of actually being paraded into the Glen Burnie Police District to get my mug shot with my entire family standing right by my side. Speaking of humiliation. But that's not why we're here. It's not about me. It's about you, and it's about listening to these incredibly wise men and women. Some work in the business. Some are in recovery. You see the gentleman in uniform from the fire department and the police department. We're all here for one reason, and that's to get a handle on what has been an absolutely devastating epidemic. So let me introduce the panel right now, and then we'll get on with their opening statements, and then we will be able to engage in the conversation. But thank you for coming. We're here. I'm here tonight not as a sportscaster, as a resident of Anne Arundel County, a longtime citizen of the county. I'm 59 years old. I've been here every minute of my life, and I am absolutely blown away by what has gone on and the fact that we're all here to try to make some sort of sense out of it, courtesy of Nancy and courtesy of Steve Shue and the kind people up here right now. But let's go to my left, a young lady whose son Jake unfortunately passed away of a heroin overdose when he was 23 years old. She will not only share that story, but also talk about some of the things she is doing to try to prevent more deaths. Please welcome Ginger Rosella. Unfortunately, every day, a young person's dying of a heroin overdose or narcotic overdose. Every day, kids, fortunately, are going into recovery to try to get some help. With us right now is a young lady currently in recovery. Please welcome Jennifer Young. Jennifer, thank you for coming. We have several representatives from the Anne Arundel County government, Anne Arundel County Health Department, representing the Environmental Strategies Department of the Anne Arundel County Health Department. Please welcome, just back from a cruise, by the way, Sandy Smolnicki. Sandy, how are you? Oh, I forgot. Oh, you guys switched on me. Ah, okay. That's okay. Before Sandy, I jumped over him because usually they're situated a little different. This young lady will shed a tremendous amount of light on some things that were discussed earlier today with the students here at Annapolis High School. She works right down the street at the Anne Arundel County Medical Center Pathways. Please welcome Mandy Larkins. Mandy, thanks for coming back. Now we'll jump over Sandy. This young lady wears many hats, including being a softball coach on the other side of the bridge. She also is the mobile crisis director for Anne Arundel County. As I mentioned, she wears many hats. We'll hear about a lot of them. And like Mandy and the gentleman next to her, Wes Adams, she was on the front lines today talking to your kids, along with Russ Davies of the fire department today. Please welcome Ms. Jen Corbin. Kind of blew this guy's introduction already. I think you already know he is the state's attorney of Anne Arundel County, has his own personal story to share with you about addiction, and he has been a tireless worker, he and his staff, to try to curb and get a handle on this epidemic. Your state's attorney in Anne Arundel County, Mr. Wes Adams. Again, the fire department and the police department on the front lines of this epidemic. Please welcome the public information officer for the fire department in Anne Arundel County, Mr. Russ Davies. And we are really honored tonight to have the Anne Arundel County Chief of Police here with us. This gentleman, again, is really doing some great work, he and his staff, to try to make this problem go away. Please welcome Chief Tim Altamari. Chief, thank you. Guys, I'm going to get the question started. I'm going to feed each one of our panelists a question, and then you guys will be able to join in. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot of interesting things today. But Ginger, we're going to start with you. Your son Jake began using opioids, pain medication, when he was in high school because of a bicycle accident. Take us through what happened with the prescribed pain medication and how that led to his heroin use.
So when Jacob was in high school, he had a bicycle accident and he had to have surgery. So we took him to Washington Hospital Center where he had surgery on his ankle. And he had to be homeschooled for a couple of months. And he was prescribed Oxycontin and Percocet. And so his dad and I gave him his pain medicine as prescribed. Little did we know that that was going to trigger something in Jacob, and he was going to start to use them off the street after his prescriptions ran out. Jacob had a couple of years of clean time. Jacob did some jail time for drinking and driving. We did sober living. We did rehab. We did everything that we knew to do. Jacob re-injured himself on his four-wheeler at the age of 23 and was re-prescribed Oxycontin when he told his doctor that he was in recovery. The doctor handed him the prescription. We asked him not to fill it, but that's like giving a kid some candy and saying, don't eat it. Jacob filled the prescription. The pills ran out. Pills are expensive on the street. A Percocet 30 is going to cost you $30, where a bag of heroin is $5 or $10. Jake was only using heroin about a month and a half before it took his life. And the last words that Jake said to me, when I knew that he was using heroin because a fellow user had told me, he held my hands and he said, "Pretty, pretty mama, I got this." And I didn't understand heroin. I thought, you know what, we dealt with the pills, so we can deal with the heroin. Well, heroin is a different beast. And 7 days later, his dad and younger brother found him dead in the bathroom. And that was 3.5 years ago. And I can tell you that it feels like 3.5 minutes ago. So what I've done since then is try to help educate families and siblings and get children into rehab so that no other family has to live the new normal that we are trying to live. Or sometimes I say the new hell that we live. I believe recovery is absolutely possible. I think that we need to educate, and the more we talk about it, the more we understand it. At the end of the panel, if you have any questions, I'm an open book. Feel free to ask. Thank you.
Ginger, thank you. Wow. I've heard that before many times, and it still resonates with the emotion and the power. Jennifer, you began misusing substances in high school. Take us through that. How old were you? What was the substance? And how did it escalate into more drug use?
Okay. So hi, guys. My name is Jen. I'm 20 years old. When I was 17, I got clean for the first time. And I got clean at 17, a month after I graduated from high school. So I'll be celebrating 3 years of recovery this September, God willing. Yeah.
All right. Well done.
And I was getting emotional up here. I was sitting with Ginger here earlier twice today for 2 different assemblies, but I got emotional because my mom's in the audience tonight. And so that story really hit me. Like, I never want my mom to have to go through that ever. I realized how loved I am, and I didn't used to realize that. When I was 14, I got high for the first time. I drank for the first time. It was really simple. Mike's Hard Lemonade, just with a boyfriend, just hanging out, and later, smoking a little weed. And it was cool for a while. I was getting in trouble with my parents and a little bit with school, nothing unmanageable. It was all just drama, until it wasn't. It became more than that, because for a long time, I grew up in a little bit of a dysfunctional home, so I don't think I was ever really comfortable with myself because of how I grew up. And so I always had this feeling of I just didn't love myself. And, I was a little suicidal growing up, in middle school and going into high school. So when I first got that drug in me, when I first smoked weed and got high off of it, it answered all my problems. It answered all my feelings. I didn't feel sad anymore, and I didn't feel lonely, and it made everything better. And I chased that high for a long time. Well, for me, a long time. I think what was that, 3 years? That was a long time for me. Like, that was 3 years of pure hell. And you know, it made me feel better for a while, but just all the consequences were just too much until my senior year when I was 17. You know, it brought me down because I have the illness of addiction, which means I have a progressive illness. So, you know, it might start off with weed and drinking, but you know, once I'm high, it sounds good for me to try, you know, hallucinogenics, or once I'm doing that, it sounds okay to try cocaine, and it sounds okay to try Molly. And like towards the end, I was doing like cocaine on a pretty regular basis as a high school student. You know, I my senior year, my mom, I couldn't live with her anymore. You know, it was not healthy for us to be around each other, so I had to leave her house, and I moved in with my dad. And you know, my dad just it was free reins from there. Like, I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. You know, he just wanted to make sure I was alive. I would send him a text every once in a while. Didn't really stay at his house. And so I was able to sink as deep as I wanted to go. And there was a time when I had to realize, did I want to go any deeper? Because at that point, the drugs were making me more depressed than I had been before. So, you know, when you do uppers like Molly or cocaine, like, it depletes all the serotonin in your brain. So after you do it, the withdrawals, it makes people kill themselves. And so at that time, like, I was faced with a choice: keep doing the drugs and keep getting more suicidal until I actually do take my own life, or believe it when my mom tells me I'm worth living. You know, believe it when my counselor at school tells me that I'm worth living. And despite how worthless I felt from doing the drugs and bringing so much shame and guilt upon myself, like, I believed them. Because I thought, hey, maybe I'm worth it, you know. And so when I was 17, with the help of my mother and my guidance counselor, I chose life.
And we are glad you're here, and we're glad you did. Jen mentioned consequences. You'll hear that a lot tonight, and I'm sure some of you guys are facing that now. Consequences in day-to-day life without substances is one thing. With them, oh man, it can bring up a variety of things. For me, it was losing my job, losing the faith and trust of my family, and trying to overcome that. Mandy, consequences of taking, smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol at an early age. Middle school, high school, and you were there today, and you and Jen and Wes and everybody's going to share some of those conversations that you had. But what are the consequences of that?
Hi, thanks for being here. So, as you just heard, there is always a progression when it comes to addiction. So, what we see, especially with heroin addiction, is there's kind of 3 ways that happens. 1, risky behavior, so drinking, smoking weed, hanging out with the wrong people, wanting to get to that next high. A teenager's brain does not develop until 25, and the last part of their brain to develop is their decision-making center. Whew, it's like fighting against them. So when you couple that with marijuana and with alcohol, it pretty much shuts that part of their brain off. So although they were sitting in the audience today, and most of them, you know, at the end of it, a couple of the teachers were saying, yeah, we heard a couple kids say, well, I'd never do heroin. Well, most people don't ever think they would do heroin. But when you are intoxicated, it certainly does change the way that you think and can make you do things that you wouldn't typically do. We're also seeing a lot of students who are self-medicating with marijuana to deal with anxiety, to deal with depression, to deal with ADHD. Unfortunately, the impact on the brain, if they get high before school, they do not learn anything. They might be calm, but they don't learn anything because it impairs your short-term memory. Plus, it can lead to other things. And the marijuana, which you'll hear, is now laced. So they might not just be smoking marijuana. They could also be taking in PCP or heroin or cocaine or something else that is being laced into the marijuana. And the last thing is unfortunately, the surgeries, the injuries, wisdom teeth, athletic injuries, re-injured, and the pressures to be the best, and I gotta play, and so just give me my pain medicine. And for some, especially if there's an underlying mental health issue, that pain medicine will be an automatic relief. And it will not be about the pain anymore. It'll be about the feeling that it gives. So what I learned from a former athlete who became addicted to his pain medication was ibuprofen worked for my pain. Percocet worked for my addiction. So we have to be really careful. And that's not to say that some people won't need pain medication, but we have to be very careful and we have to recognize those signs and symptoms. Please do not excuse underage partying, because it 100% can lead to either something really bad happening that night, that one party, or a lifelong disease.
Thank you, Mandy. Well said. We will hear much more from Mandy in the Q&A segment, no doubt. Sandy, as a member of the community, we're all obviously members of the community. What can we do? What can the community do to battle this disease?
The community. I think we need to remember that community is made up of individuals, and all of you are individuals in this community. So I want to thank you all for coming tonight, taking the time out of your day to come and hear us. The other thing we need to remember is that the empty blue seats are part of our community. Those people who are not here, that may need to be here, and they didn't come for one reason or another. So the main thing I think that the community can do is, number one, educate yourself by being here. You're going to hear some resources in a moment, and then you need to, next time you come to a Not My Child, bring 5 more people. Okay. So as community members, you are all connected to various organizations. Any of us are available to come and speak in more detail about these issues anytime, just about, and you can contact us and we will be there. You're very fortunate in Annapolis to have the Annapolis Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. And it is a rockin' and rollin' coalition. Angel Trainer, I know she's here in the back probably. And they are, and Cheryl Menendez, they are growing and growing. There are 40 people that come together every month. I think the list is over 300. Please join us. We are preventing substance abuse. I want you to know that my daughter graduated from this high school. Yeah, she was IB. She was the second, yeah. My daughter graduated, she was IB. And she got married last May. And, right, so one of her bridesmaids died of an overdose. And so she didn't get over that, and so since May, she's been through 7 detoxes, 7 treatment programs, failed, 6 IOPs. She's headed into her next recovery house in Florida. And yep, they're going on their 1st-year anniversary. So I'm here to tell you that I'm really very grateful for that, because everybody here really has to know, just because you went to Annapolis High School, it doesn't make you immune. Regardless, join us at the coalition meetings. We have very important information for you at preventsubstanceabuse.org. There is a parent toolkit on that. The website has been renovated. You can look for the parent toolkit and determine how you want to talk to your kids about just about anything, but certainly using drugs and other risky behaviors. You need to really lock up and dispose of your prescription medications very carefully. There is a very detailed section on the website about that, and I'm sure you must know that Prescription Drug Take-Back Day is coming soon. It's on the 29th of this month, and we'll be at the Annapolis Police Department as well as all of the county police departments collecting medications. But you know, you don't have to wait until then. You can dispose of your prescription medications 24/7 at any police station. Get them out of your home, because you don't know who will come in with others, with repair people, with your children's friends. You don't know. You really don't know. So I guess what I would say is, there are 2 signs in the front of this high school that say parents who host lose the most. And what I would say is, know that watching your child go through a wisdom teeth extraction and pain is just really not as bad as watching them go through a heroin detox, times 7. So, denial is deadly. Bring your friends next time.
Sandy, thank you. Sandy mentioned ways to talk to your kids about this issue. We'll hear much more about that a little later. We'll give you some tips on how your kids might be able to handle dicey situations at parties and things like that, dances. It is a real interesting panel we have tonight. Next up, Jen Corbin, the Mobile Crisis Director. Talk about a busy lady. As I mentioned, wears a variety of hats. Jen, you were among the people this morning that were here today. You've been all over the county talking to middle school kids, high school kids. What are you hearing from them? And again, we'll go into detail a bit later as well. But what are you hearing from them as to this situation?
Yeah. So I'm just going to be honest because I see kids with parents in the audience, and I think this is really our opportunity to kind of get the dialogue started so when people go home they can have this conversation with their kids, because I don't want it to just be us having that conversation with your kids, which is kind of what I feel like right now. Mandy, myself, and Wes go to a lot of the schools. I also go into health classes and different stuff and have conversations. I need to tell you that this title of this program is real. People think it's not their kids. It doesn't matter if your kid is in STEM program, honors, AP, an athlete, in 20,000 activities after school. I'm going to tell you, they all know someone who's using something, at least marijuana, if not harder, because we've been in the middle schools this year, and the drug the most where the hands go up in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, if you know someone who's using, is using marijuana. It's not drinking, it's not smoking, it's marijuana. So if that's happening in middle schools, imagine what's going on in the high schools. I've got high schools telling me their marijuana is laced with cocaine. It's sparkly. They don't realize the danger they're putting themselves into. You've got to have the conversation early. You've got to talk to them about how to handle themselves at parties, how to understand peer pressure, because it's in all the sports teams. You can say it's not. I coach a high school team. My girls tell me all the time about what they're faced with in school. We have open dialogues about it at the junior and senior level. We need to have those conversations. Just to explain to you kind of why I'm up here and what happens is crisis response is a 24-hour program in the county that has licensed clinicians, mobile crisis teams. Basically what we do is we respond with the police department. We're on police radio. And we respond to calls for service, but whether it's mental health or substance use related or anything that officers need our assistance with. We are actually therapists on wheels pretty much. And what we do is link people to resources. Well, why am I up here? Because we also do death notifications. So of all the deaths that we've had in heroin, normally we're with the officers to tell someone that their loved one has passed away due to an overdose. And we told the kids today that we don't want their parents to be the next ones. And so we're open and honest to them about that. It's very important for you to also understand that we gave the kids today our number. When I'm in the middle schools, we make the kids put it in their phone because a lot of times it's peer-to-peer where they ask for help. They don't always run to mom or dad or to an adult. And we've been getting actually a lot of calls on the warm line from peers asking for us to help their friend. And that's a start. And so I tell kids, it's okay if you tell a friend because we're going to teach those friends to reach out to an adult. That might be that friend that goes to the counselor. But our warm line is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We never shut down. Our teams are always available. The chief and I and fire and all are working really hard to try to really do what Nancy was explaining, no new users. That's the key here, is getting the kids coming through middle school and high school to start saying no and to make good decisions. And so part of that is giving them the tools to help them, which is ways to reach out for help, whether it's for themselves, a family member, or a friend. So right now, if I can just ask you to do anything, you take what you hear tonight, you take it back, and you have that conversation with your child. If you don't have it, or you don't know how to start it, talk to us about it. We will work with you. I've had a lot of parents ask me, how do you start that conversation? And how do you keep it going in your house? Mandy and I have tons of tools for that, but you have to have it. don't think that you can get away with not having it. You need to have it so that they know how to say no and they find ways around it. So we'll be available afterwards if you need anything. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I think that is crucial, guys. That is crucial. I think we may even touch that a little bit later as well. Wes Adams, as I mentioned, you have a personal involvement in this scenario as well, but also, of course, as the state's attorney, you see a wide variety of scenarios. Please tell us what your office is doing along with the police department and Jen in trying to curb this problem.
Thank you. So obviously our main role is law enforcement. We work together with the police and fire and all aspects or all investigators around the county to curb the supply of drugs coming into this community. As you saw yesterday, or 2 days ago, Anne Arundel County Police, $175,000 of marijuana, cocaine, and a drug called ketamine, which it's a dissociative anesthetic that is generally laced into the marijuana, not just simply marijuana anymore. Chief and I, working together, have orchestrated the largest heroin bust in Anne Arundel County history. 3.5 keys of heroin, a dozen guns, $1 million in assets, and it just gets replaced. So Chief and I could work in concert 24 hours a day, arrest every dealer that's currently on the street, and because the demand doesn't go down, the supply keeps coming back in. That is why we spend, in my office, we have a narcotics unit, we wires and undercovers and you name it, we're working it. But where we have spent a large majority of our time is inside the community on education and prevention. I'm going to hit education last and education prevention last. The third step or the third piece of the puzzle is rehabilitation. We have a very active drug court. I'm working together with the county exec to expand it, actually to double its size. At the circuit court level, we roll through approximately 300 people, having them enrolled in our program right now. The success rate for people coming out of our drug court program is in the 75 to 80%. Do not reoffend, do not go back to using drugs, do not commit another crime. It's a fantastic program. But really what we're talking about when we think about long-term change in the county and in our community is about education and prevention. So Keith mentioned I have a very personal bent on this particular epidemic. I grew up in an addicted household. My parents split when I was 8, watched my dad get dragged out of my house all the time, usually in handcuffs. And much like Jen's story, as I got older, I could go hang with my dad, and all that meant was I alive? There was, drugs around my house or around his house. I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I grew up in that environment. What saved me was my mother had me in program when I was, I think in 4th grade is when I started. I joke sometimes that I knew the Serenity Prayer before I knew the Lord's Prayer. Education is the key, because my first drink was at 14. And when I hit college, it was, I'm on my own. So the only person who can make the choice is your kid. We have to stop it, because if we're not stopping it at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level, we do not really have a chance to curb the new users. We have grown from 350 overdoses in 2015 to we're looking at a projected 1,500 to 1,600 this year. That's 1 in every 375 people here in the county. The way that's coming, it's not the 40-year-olds that are overdosing. It's getting younger and younger. Our youngest overdose of the year right now is a 13-year-old. So we need to stop at that age level. So we are focusing our attention, our education piece on the 13-year-olds and on the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, because if we can't break the cycle there, this epidemic is going to continue. The last piece of this is, many of you may have heard or seen in the news, I buried my brother-in-law 3 months ago. 4 months ago now. He graduated, they're from Charles County, but he graduated, went to Cornell, ended up coming back to Maryland and finishing school, managed millions of dollars for an insurance company, and married 2-year-old. It can affect anybody, anywhere, anytime. no matter what I could do as a state's attorney, you can't, there's not much to do once the addiction takes over except wait for them to recover. And even then, as you heard Sandy, 7 times for her daughter. Nick went in and out of recovery 3 times, was 100 days clean, working his recovery when he finally overdosed again and died. We have to start at stopping, start at prevention. We can't go any other place than that, because that's where we're going to make a change. Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Man, that's powerful. 13 years old. 13 years old. You know, the consequences for the 13-year-old is not the video game taken away, or you're not going to be able to go out and play your Little League baseball game. It could be death at 13 years old. Man, that is powerful. Captain Davies, speaking of powerful, your colleagues are quite often, if not all the time, the first responders to an overdose. Take us through the scenario, Captain, in regards to what these men and women do on site, how they treat the victim, and I'll have a follow-up question to you after that.
Okay, before I go into that, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight, but I especially want to thank the parents that are here with their children. My daughter is 10, and she sat in the front row of one of these and endured the awkward car ride home. So I just want to tell you, if you had doubts, it's never too soon to start talking to your kids, because you just never know, when they're going to be faced with that situation. You just have to hope that you've given them the information to make the right decisions. So painting the picture for an overdose, at one of these prior forums, we had a recovering teen named Nick, and he made the comment, addicts can be anybody, and that's exactly what we're seeing in Anne Arundel County. It can be anybody, and it can be anywhere. We find overdoses in fast food restaurants, in the restrooms. We find them in hotel rooms, slumped over the wheel in parked cars. More and more frighteningly, we find single-car auto accidents on Solomon's Island Road between Annapolis and Calvert County, where the paramedics are having to give the driver Narcan because their accident was caused by them shooting up, and then the Narcan, the opioid taking effect, and then running off the road. And we see it in private residences all over this county. There's no area of this county that's exempt. So, talking about what a heroin overdose looks like, and keep in mind there's a difference between a heroin and opioid overdose and just being under the influence. So what we're talking about is overdoses. We're not even touching about the people that are just under the influence of these drugs. So if you can imagine somebody who's unconscious, breathing 1 or 2 times per minute, turning blue, their lips are turning blue, fingers are ashen and gray, sweating profusely, that's what a heroin overdose looks like. And I hope that that's something that you never have to witness and never have to experience. So the good part of that is there's no other medical emergency that mimics a heroin overdose. So the treatment of choice is Narcan, which I'm sure you've heard about in the news. Paramedics have been carrying Narcan since the 1970s. Because of the problem in this county, the firefighters and the EMTs and even the county police here have been using it and administering it for about 3 years. And if you think these numbers are bad, the deaths that we're seeing, just imagine what they weren't if the county police weren't carrying the Narcan. Sometimes they get there first, and they've probably given it, what, Chief, 120 or 130 times so far this year?
We're over a couple.
Yeah, so if you think it's bad, it could be far worse. So that's the initial treatment, and now fortunately it's also available through the health department. The Narcan is available to citizens, if you have at-risk family members.
When you treat an overdose victim, are they often by themselves? Take us through that scenario.
Yes, it's a scenario we call 2 becomes 1. Many times when the paramedics and the firefighters and the police arrive at an overdose, the victim is by themselves. But what's been found is about 80% of the time a heroin user will shoot up with somebody else. But then when they go into those symptoms that we described, when they start experiencing that overdose, the person that they were with basically leaves them there to die. So Chief Altamari, when he speaks, is going to talk about the Good Samaritan law and just how important that is to avoid those situations.
Yeah, thank you, Russ. Appreciate it. Chief, perfect segue. Good Samaritan law, Alex and Calvin's law. I know in the Q&A, there'll be a variety of other things you can address. Take us through those two right now, though.
Good evening, folks. How are you?
He's playing hurt tonight, guys. Playing hurt tonight. It's on a DL.
I'm either going to sound like I'm doing helium or I'm going to sound like this, so I'm going to stay like this. Thank you for coming out. Truly, the fact that you're here tonight means you're part of the solution. I want you to look around, though. Look around at this auditorium at the empty seats. There's between 50 and 60 of you sitting there. I counted. There's space in here for probably 1,000 people. We've got some serious work to do in this community if we're going to get in front of this problem. I appreciate you being here tonight. Some of the things you're going to hear me say may be too graphic. They may be not as warm and fuzzy as people like to hear, but I'm telling you, I've watched too many people die. The numbers keep going up, and we've got to do something to get in front of it. And before I go on about Alex and Calvin's law and the Good Samaritan law, you've heard tonight about addiction, and opioid addiction is the big devil of all addictions. So we've got a young lady here tonight who's been fighting the fight of her life for 3 years, and I'm extremely proud of her. Can we give Jen another hand for 3 years?
Hear, hear.
So let's talk about Alex and Calvin's law. You heard tonight how underage partying is the precursor to most of our cases that end up with somebody dead from opioid addiction. Alex and Calvin's law occurred in 2016 when a car full of kids left a party after partying, alcohol, maybe some weed, wrapped themselves around a tree and killed 2 of them. And what Alex and Calvin law did is make it criminally punishable for you to have hosted that party and allowed that activity to go on when you knew or reasonably should have known that kids were going to get behind the wheel of a car and drive and might kill himself. And I'm going to take a piece of Wes's playbook here and say, what is reasonably should have known? If they brought these, you reasonably should have known that kids could drive from a house after you hosted a party. So it allows for criminal prosecution of the hosts of that party, whether it is the adult parents of the kid whose house it is, or whether it's the 18-year-old high school senior whose parents were away who hosted the party that ended up with a fatality. We haven't had our first test case here in Anne Arundel County yet. That's a good thing. We're not losing kids at the rate of some of the other counties to that phenomenon in this county. The Good Samaritan law is, you heard Captain Davies talk about 2 becomes 1. People in the throes of addiction do not trust authority. It's a hallmark of addiction. They're not the same person they were before they became addicted. As you've heard, their brain chemistry has changed. They hate the police in many instances. It's just the truth. So what the Good Samaritan law does is it gives immunity in limited circumstances to somebody who called for help or who needed the help because of a drug overdose in the state of Maryland. So for instance, you're with a friend. You and your friend both get high. Your friend starts to crash. You call 911 to get help for that friend. You get a freebie and the friend gets a freebie. Even if we find heroin and needles and cooking paraphernalia and all that stuff on the floor between you, you get a freebie because we're there to save lives. So that is basically what the Good Samaritan law does. It is responsible for some of our reported numbers going up. That's a good thing. It's a kind of weird circumstance that we're saying it's a good thing that numbers are going up. But when people are calling more, it's a good thing. So let me give you a snapshot as of last Wednesday for Anne Arundel County this year up to last Wednesday. We'd had 335 total documented overdoses. 304 of them were non-fatal. We had lost 31 people in Anne Arundel County as of last Wednesday. The good news is that we had saved 67 people just in law enforcement with naloxone or Narcan since the first of the year. That doesn't take into account what the ERs and the fire folks have done. So we're saving more lives. We've got some wins, but we need a lot more help, folks, and we've got to start talking about it. And if I can give you a plea as your police chief, just to bank on what I talked about with Calvin and Alex's law, we need you to be parents to your kids, folks. They're going to have friends their whole life. You can be their friends when you got them to 30 alive. Now they need parents. Somebody has to say no besides the police and the prosecutors. No ain't a bad word. No, you're not going to the party when I don't know those people. No, you're not drinking at 15 years old. I don't care what your friends do. At the end of the day, when they get to 30 alive, they're going to thank you. And that's our job as parents, not to be their best friends when they're young. Thank you.
Oh, well said, Chief, well said. Russ, thank you. Thanks to all of our panelists for sharing, in some cases, some pretty powerful messages to you. Now it's your turn. Want to hear your feedback, some questions you have for any one of us. Fire away. Yes, ma'am.
The fact that you are pushing this and trying to make it as public as possible. The only reason I knew about tonight's film and panel discussion was because I live in Annapolis. I belong to the Southern County Police District, and I always go to their monthly meetings, and there was a flyer listing different dates and locations for this film. I'm going to say something now that might offend you, and I beg of you, try to understand what I'm saying. I have begged and pleaded with Rick Hutzel, editor of the Capitol, to publicize ahead of time many different events. I just talked with him last week because in the paper was the pictures of the wounded warriors during the bike ride, and it wasn't advertised ahead of time. There weren't people along the side of the road cheering them on and so on. They needed for their morale and self-esteem. Here again, for this meeting, this film for tonight, it was not in the Capitol. I do it every night. I read the Capitol every night. And I just wish that you would do more about publicizing ahead of time events like this. This whole room should be jam-packed, jam-packed. I'm looking around, can't be any more than, I'm going to say 75 people at the most in here. And that's appalling. I'm glad you're doing it for the students during the daytime, but it's the public, it's the adults who are at work in the daytime. This is the type of thing they want to come to at night. Please, please do more publicity ahead of time. And again, tomorrow, I will be calling the Capitol, which I've done numerous times before, and beg and plead with them again. They have to publicize events like this ahead of time. This room should be packed 100%. Thank you.
Ma'am, you're preaching to the choir. Anybody want to take that one on? I can, as a member of the media. We need to do more. There's absolutely no question about it. That is a responsibility now that we need more than any time in the history of this country. We need to do what we did 30 years ago to publicize the drunk driving crusade. We need to do the same thing now. Keep fighting the fight with the Capitol. We're going to fight the fight at WBAL. Can't speak for the other stations. These guys do a tremendous job of getting the word out. Nancy does as well in their own circles. So I'm going to absolve everyone up here from that responsibility. But from a media standpoint, that's got to change. Has to change. You guys can put some pressure on the media sources that you use. It's that simple. Anybody else? Doing great. Come on down. We're going to come to you. How about that? We got a mic right behind you, sir. Dave's.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for everybody coming. I do have one question. I'd like to ask the panel, Yeah, we're trying to combat and fight this heroin addiction. I'm in recovery myself, okay? And I thank God that I'm still here today. Okay? I'm not going to go in detail about my situation, but I will say that, the heroin epidemic is really bad in this county and this city, and something really needs to be done about it. But my question to the panel is, how do we look at the situation when there's been an overdose and that individual is being sent to Arundel Medical Center, okay? And Arundel Medical Center does everything possible to resuscitate this individual, to get them back to themselves, but then turn right back around and releases this person. Then the person overdoses again, okay, and go back to Arundel Medical Center again, and they fix the situation again and releases this person again, and so forth and so on. To me, if we're gonna help people, there's got to be a place or something needs to be done. And I know that you can't hold people against their own will, okay? But to me, is medical records would state that this individual has a problem, okay? And to me, that the medical center is just gonna, I'm just gonna fix this guy up and I'm just gonna let him walk out the door. I'm not saying, and Pathways been there, done that. So I thank God that you're here, okay? So I'm not talking down on the medical system or whatever, but I just don't think that it's, fair to let someone walk right back out the door after they have been through the hospital 4 and 5, 6, 7, and 8 times to get help, and the hospital says, "Oh, here's your paperwork. See you next time." That's all I got to say.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've got the answer for you.
Well, we have 2 answers. So let me start from a legislative standpoint. I actually talked to some of our delegates about probably a somewhat controversial idea of a mandatory inpatient for someone who's Narcaned. The situation that you're talking about where these guys come in on an overdose, save somebody, bring them back to life, take them to the medical center. I have started working with the legislature to create a law that would commit that person for treatment. We'll see if it gets anywhere over the next few years. It was not very well received up front right now. There is a law in Massachusetts called Section 35 that institutes the same type of program that has been fairly successful. So hopefully in the upcoming year, from a legislative standpoint, that's something that I'll continue to work on. But on a front line is Jen, who does it a lot different.
Great question, and I actually kind of have an answer for you, seeing as how I was at BWMC today meeting with the ER, and yesterday I was at, AMC yesterday, BWMC today. And this past January, I don't think people realize how much the chief of police has done recently to address this issue. We have a crisis intervention unit within crisis response, which we have special trained officers who are paired with licensed clinicians who go out every day for mental health calls, social situation calls, and heroin. And starting this past January, we were able to get an officer and a clinician paired together that all they do every single day is go to every person who overdosed the day before, knock on their door, find them, and offer them treatment. And we have, and I don't even know if the chief knows because I haven't been able to see him, we just finished the stats for the first 3 months. A 13% increase in people being placed into programs, whether it's an outpatient program, an inpatient program, a peer support program, they've been linked. You put that on top of, we go every day into the hospital to people who self-present wanting help that are so desperate they hit rock bottom, they don't know where to go, they drag themselves in the ER. We're seeing a 10 to 15% placement rate, if not higher, of inpatient. And then the follow-up care they're getting. So we're starting to see those numbers, and like the chief and I said, last year was about 5%. Right now we're looking at about 20. If we keep doing that and adding more resources out there, the resources are there. The problem, and I agree with what you said, I don't know if people understood, it's linking them to it, holding their hand. When you're in withdrawal, you can't do it alone. And so the hospital will stabilize you, but there's nobody there at the hospital to walk you through the next step. So Crisis has taken this to the forefront to do that this past January. We just started 3 months ago. And 13% to me was a shocker. I was thrilled. Considering 157, I think, of them, of overdoses, we couldn't locate because they're don't live anywhere or we can't find them, so we try to go to where they've overdosed, plus the 47 people who overdosed in our county that weren't county residents. So you take those numbers away, the people that were knocking on doors were having a pretty good success rate. Trying to get the hospitals on board is taking me a little bit of time. I had really good meetings this week. I think in the next couple of months, we'll see some change through the ERs as we're getting the nurses to buy into holding them a little longer. What's the big deal? If you hold them another hour, we'll get there and we'll hold their hand through it. But they weren't willing to do that before. But after the conversations we had this week with the numbers, we're getting somewhere. So I hope that answers it. We're really working on it. But I couldn't agree more with your point about the hospitals, but I think they're starting to buy in.
People are starting to listen, boss, about more beds. You know what I mean? They're starting to listen. It's starting to get traction up to the governor's level. He's listening.
That's what I was just going to say. I mean, Pathways is owned and operated through Anne Arundel Medical Center. We don't sit on campus, but we're employed by the hospital. And even then, we only have 40 beds. So we can't even take every single overdose that comes into the ED into our own treatment center. It's not possible. We need more beds. We need more access to care. We need 24-hour treatment. There's no doubt that anyone on this panel doesn't agree with you with that. And I will agree with you and Jen that yes, emergency department nurses and docs, they do need more education. They're asking us for it. We're trying to provide it as quickly as possible because they absolutely need more education about this. However, when it comes to treatment of someone that's just overdosed, they do medically stabilize them and then they have to release them. So hopefully with Jen's help, with our help, our nurse manager is over at that ED almost once a week trying to help them understand what these patients are going through. We can get them to hold them for another hour so that we can hopefully place them. But just like you said, we cannot hold them against their will. If you guys don't understand, a 13-year-old, we start treating patients at 13. We cannot hold a 13-year-old even with their parents' permission. They have to want the treatment. It's a Maryland law. So everyone who steps foot in our doors has to sign saying they are ready and willing to accept treatment. That's tough. And if you listen to Jen's numbers, although they are really exciting for someone in this field, it's 10 to 15%. 10 to 15%. So the other folks are not getting treatment. And when you are administered Narcan, you're upset. You go through immediate withdrawal. And most of the patients that we're seeing are leaving immediately because they want the next high. And that's just the grip of addiction. It's sad, but we are working on it. So thank you for your comments.
Yes.
Just a note, I stole a microphone from the panelists, so if you guys could pass it down so we can hear you in post-production. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated. Two questions that I had, if you will. One panelist up there made some remark about the fact that the take-back day for the medications were on the 29th. And then they followed up with some side comment on top of that, that you could, basically take it back any day, not just on take-back day. My question is that true to all counties or just Anne Arundel County as part of my first question?
We don't know, but we believe that they would have prescription drug take-back boxes. It's per county.
I'm sorry. If you have a county you got in your head you're wondering about,
PG County. I'm from PG County. I'm in Bowie. I'm in Bowie. Yes, they do. Yeah. So we can take medications back there anytime based on the comment that one of you made about, kids, being the host house and all that other stuff and coming through and all the other, technicians periodically coming through and everything.
Yes, you can. So I work with Maryland Coalition of Families as a family peer support specialist. And one of my counties is PG County. And so I represent PG, Charles, St. Mary's, Anne Arundel, and Calvert County. And so in those counties, I help parents get their children into rehab or help parents just be a friendly ear on the other end of the phone or give them guidance of what to do next or how to talk to them. So yes, the PG County Police Department has a drop box and you can take it there anytime.
Okay, thank you. My other question would be more for the other three gentlemen on the other end of the table with regard to everything, and that is to say, my wife and I have periodically talked about, do we stay, do we go, if we were to go, where would we go? And we have talked about Anne Arundel off and on. How do you all see Anne Arundel as it stacks against the numbers of other counties with regard to usage? Because she's more Facebook savvy than I am, and she sees this stuff go through the Facebook all the time, and I don't know if that's, fact, myth, what?
Great question. Okay,
Thank you.
As it relates to opioids and heroin, Anne Arundel County is about the third hardest hit in the state of Maryland. So that's a fact. We're still a great place to live. You see people here. I live here. Captain Davies lives here. Wes lives here. We're all public safety types, so we're more sensitive to stuff than other people in our communities. It's a great place to live. I'll tell you, absolutely, come on, move this way. But it's a fact of life for us. And PG County, for whatever reason, the heroin, and we're talking about opioids and heroin here tonight, the heroin problem has not hit there as hard. They got a problem. The only place in the country it doesn't exist without a problem. So we're number 3 in the state. We got a problem, but we're still a great place to live. I'd tell you move tomorrow. We'd love to have you.
I will say this, not as a politician, as a resident, this is the best program I've ever seen in Anne Arundel County, and it is unprecedented in the state. There's some other jurisdictions that go into the schools, but nothing like this. I've been up to Carroll County, Harford County. This is amazing what these people are doing here. And if that helps to answer your question, I've never met a more devoted and more serious group of people that are serious about eliminating this problem than these people right here, Nancy and Steve Shue. Absolutely. No doubt about it. Over here.
Hi.
Oh, yes.
Hi, my name's Ann. I'm an addict, and we have an NA booth out here, and we also I saw a Nar-Anon booth as well, giving out information. I was wondering what your opinions are of the 12-step fellowships regarding the addiction problem.
The 12-step program?
Yes.
Take it away, Jen.
All right. So in my opinion, the only thing that has ever helped me get clean and stay clean is a 12-step program. So, I tried therapy, I tried church, I tried a relationship, I tried being spiritual. Like, none of it ever helped me because I needed a program that was so strict and was so regimented and was filled with people just like me who would understand exactly what I'm going through. That's the only thing that's ever worked for me consistently. And I've devoted my life to a 12-step program because for me, a 12-step program isn't something I go into once a month when I'm feeling bad. It's something I do on a consistent basis because I don't think people understand addiction. There's no cure for it. There's no cure for addiction. I will be an addict for the rest of my life, And there is nothing that I can do with therapy once a week. That's not enough. I need to go to meetings regularly, work a program in order to stay clean for the rest of my life.
Well said.
Typically, treatment centers do suggest the 12-step program, but there are other alternatives to the 12-step program if people do not choose that. We see great success for those that do. We also have a family wellness workshop twice a month on a Saturday, in which we bring in Al-Anon guest speakers or Nar-Anon guest speakers to talk about, going to Al-Anon or Nar-Anon as a family member of someone who is struggling, because even for that family member, it helps. There's also Alateen. So that's another 12-step program for teens who are struggling with a loved one who has the disease of addiction. There is one meeting in the county in Broadneck area on Thursday nights at 6:30. Strongly, it's a great teen meeting. But there are other options for folks, and whatever really works. It's just that success rates show that 12-step program works. For some, especially our younger patients, some of them are not comfortable with the spirituality piece of the 12-step program, even though spirituality doesn't necessarily mean God. It's just they're not comfortable. So there is something called Smart Recovery, and then on the opposite end of that, which is more towards religion and spirituality, is Celebrate Recovery. So there's different options as well, but we very much appreciate the support here from the 12-step programs for the whole gamut of family to patients to teens, because we know that it works. I think everybody should work the 12 steps. I mean, it is just a way of life. It's just a way of life.
No question.
And yeah.
I went to 2 rehabs, one at Father Martin's Ashley and Haverty Grace. The other was Eric Clapton's facility in Antigua. And the reason I went there is my brother-in-law and sister knew if I went to Father Martin's, I was going to leave because I didn't think I needed any more help. And it wasn't until I got to Eric Clapton's that I listened to the whole process. And my brother-in-law and sister went down and supported me, and they walked out of there thinking, as Mandy just said, I want to try to do this for my day-to-day life. It was so positive. So whatever works for you, I think that's what we're talking about. Yes?
Thank you. My name is Luis, and I've met Mandy as well as Sandy. And I have a different story, and I have a whole different view of what's going on here. And I can see, I'm a systems engineer. I'm a veteran. I've also worked in Congress and the US Senate. And I never thought that this would happen to me and to my family, because I did everything possible and everything right, and this happened to me. So I have 2 questions. One for the state attorney. What are you doing? What is the state legislation doing to educate judges, lawyers, on the legal system about what's going on? Because they play a key role about what's wrong. We know for a fact, scientifically, that the brains, and Mandy has talked about this, is not developed until 25 for young kids. So how can you be complicit to put kids at 22, 25 into jail without giving them the proper time to heal? It takes literally 3 months for our blood system to be replaced. And it took me 18 months to recover, and I had to do it by myself. So we have to look at this scientifically. We have to look at it from fresh perspective eyes, that we're all unique in how we're chemically put together. And we have the answer. And Jennifer, you have the answer yourself. But you have to recognize what works for you. Because 12-step, it only doesn't work for everybody. It didn't work for me. I had to figure it out on my own. And I had to tell my doctors and everyone else, this is not working for me. And they didn't know anything. It's amazing. So we have to educate not only our medical doctors. The last conversation I had with Mandy a couple of months ago when I had a meeting here, we don't hold those doctors accountable. There is no registry. There is no information. The public is not being informed about the doctors who are giving us prescriptions without proper information about the side effects. I would never have taken the drugs if the doctor would have given me the information. So that's my first question. The second question is for Janet, but I'll wait for your answers.
Okay, so I'm going to work backwards. With respect to the warnings, Delegate Kipke and I were down, testified in front of the Government Operations Committee this year. Nick Kipke literally introduced that bill at my request on providing warnings. But part of the story that I tell was I had back surgery, I had a disc fused, guy came in, they gave me 90+ oxys, and the only thing they warned me about was constipation. Not a lick about the addictive properties of it. And that's part of the whole pharmaceutical industry's money-making scheme, or their profit-maximizing scheme, is to overcome doctors' willingness and the fears or apprehension against prescribing opiates. Opiates were supposed to be palliative care, end-of-life care, not day-to-day pain management. So I'm with you on that. Been fighting it. Like I said, we introduced legislation the first time. From a prosecuting doctor's perspective, I have to catch them like a drug dealer. They have certain benefits and protections under their rights as prescribing physicians, and it makes it near impossible to prosecute one. I'm going to tell you, I promise you, I am looking for one. I want one. I understand where it is, and if I find one, they better look out. The third part, I'm going to take a little offense to being complicit, but I understand your point, and let me try to address it in a couple of different ways. First, I can't force an addict to do anything. You understand that. If you hit your own bottom, you know that until you hit bottom, there's nothing I can do. I will say that I have a responsibility not just to an addict, but to an entire community. Same with Chief. And so if you are an addict and you are committing ancillary crimes that go with the car thefts, the B&Es, the smash and grabs, the purse snatching, you name it, then I'm going to put you in jail if you're a menace to my community. However, my drug court is in district court at the misdemeanor level is triple the size or almost quadruple the size of it at the felony level. That's where we concentrate on helping people. You want to talk about kids, it's really our juvenile justice system that's failing the kids because there's very little consequence at the juvenile justice level. And so there's very little I can do to affect juvenile justice or juvenile change of behavior because programs aren't suited to treat them. We had a juvenile drug court at one point. It went away because the judges weren't imposing any consequences and the program became abandoned. We have been looking, I don't know where Carol is in my audience, but the person turned right around you is my director of community outreach. We have been working since the day I came in here to try to reestablish a juvenile level diversion option because when I get them at 18 or 19, they have been modeling abusive behavior for 5 to 6 years. So there is no 30-day fix for that. To redirect behavior that 18, and that's the earliest. If I get them at 18 years in one day, that's how early I can get them. They've been modeling behavior for probably 50% of their cognizant or sentient life. To undo that takes time and effort. We work at it, we have a drug court, but it's not, unless people are willing to enter, it's a voluntary program, it's worked through with their defense attorney. We offer carrots of scrubbing their record, taking away the criminal consequences, but unless they're willing to get involved and join the program, many of them would rather take the slap on a wrist or walk out with a simple conviction for possession because culturally it's not a big deal. So it's not a simple answer as me being complicit with judges. Do I agree with you that changes have to be made throughout the criminal justice system? 100%. Do I wish my judges would sentence more for different offenses so that our program would have a little more teeth that would create bigger incentives for people to rehabilitate themselves? Absolutely. But that's the reality of what we're faced with. We're doing everything we can at every level. Chief hands out letters to people who have overdosed. We are working together as agencies to develop new approaches to it. It's not just as simple as us locking up a 22-year-old.
Thank you. The last question, very briefly, is to Jen. One of the big questions, I have 2 daughters that are teenagers. The question, Jen, is how did you get a hold of the drugs? I mean, as a parent, I can only do so much, and I wanted to know exactly what's going on in your realm and how'd you got access to the drugs. Thank you.
So, it's funny because I rarely ever bought drugs. throughout my whole using period because I had other friends to supply them. I had a boyfriend to supply them. Like that was probably like a reoccurring theme in my life was to have a drug dealing boyfriend in high school who was a little bit older and like just had access to things that I wanted. It wasn't so much the relationship with that guy that I was enjoying, you know, and so it started with a boy, you know, and then it just progressed until, you know, I met a girlfriend who was dealing drugs, and she became my best friend, you know, for probably that reason. You know, it was whoever could give me what I want when I wanted it, which is all the time, you know, and so I'd have these relationships with people who I could be with on a regular basis who I knew could supply me drugs. Like I didn't have friendships with people who weren't using. Like, you know, the relationships that have survived my teens were the ones with people who weren't using, because those were the ones who really cared about me, you know. So now that I'm on the other side, I realize like it's really, really crucial for parents to know who their friends were, and that was a problem my mom had. And like I want to like dispel any thoughts that my parents were somehow bad parents because I became a drug addict, because they're not. They were never my friend. They always wanted to help me. They wanted to know where I was going, who my friends were, but I wanted to hide it all because I knew what I was doing. You know, I knew who my friends were. I knew where I was going. I just don't want to let them know because I knew what they'd say. I knew I'd have consequences. You know, so that's what it was for me.
Hey, Jen, hand that mic. I'm sorry, Ginger, go ahead.
I just want to say that when Jacob was buying drugs off the street, he was getting them from a friend's grandmother who was being prescribed 130 Percocets or Oxycontin for her fibromyalgia, and so she would sell them or give them to her grandson, and he would take them to school to sell them. So she was doing that to make ends meet so that she could survive. So it can be anybody. I mean, Jake would get them from his friends' parents, and they would say, hey, can you sell these? Or their grandparents. And I can tell you, not to defend the grandmother, but I don't think the grandmother in her mind thought she was doing anything wrong. But clearly she was. I mean, she technically was a drug dealer. So that kind of stuff happens. Nobody needs 150 Oxycontin, right? And I can tell you that the doctors don't prescribe that many anymore. And you also have to be aware, too, that veterinarians, right? Kids today now are using pet meds to get high. So just don't worry about your doctors and dentists, right? You need to also worry about your veterinarians because they can prescribe narcotics to their animals. And I know of kids that use their pet meds to get high.
Ginger, pass that down to Mandy or Jen. You were saying something last week about some of the kids you've talked to in school are saying the drug addicts are in the school, right?
Oh,
Share that.
I was just going to say, I mean, you can get drugs at school. I mean, there are drug dealers at school. There are drugs in the school. There are kids high at school. There are also, what will happen is kind of the top big dog guys will send their runner drug dealers out to parties, and they will offer drugs for free at first so that kids will take the drugs and then they'll come back for more. So they're just kind of like up here hanging out. Oh, you know, this is my buddy, came over, you know, or this is my new girlfriend, and you know, she's got the good stuff, and they offer them for free first so that they can make money. There is no doubt that if you ask a high schooler if they know somebody that can get them drugs, most likely the answer would be yes. Yep. Most likely the answer would be yes. And that is across every single school in this county. There is no school exempt from that. I think that Jen brings up a really good point, because a lot of what we talk about with some ideas for parents to, you know, make sure that their kids are safe. First off, there is no prescription. Every kid is different. There is no checklist. There is no, I can do this with this kid, and this is why my kid didn't do drugs, because the next kid could be totally different. So every child is, there's just no written word for you to follow. It's just the reality. One risky decision could be it. But I think it's very important that you do know who your child's friends are, that you are friends with your child's friends' parents. That's really important. Monitor their cell phone. Look at their social media. I'll tell you right now, kids are sneaky and they're super smart. Jen knows that. I mean, they know that. So the other piece of it is don't be judgmental if they do come to you for help. That is the scariest thing for teenagers, to go to their parents and say, I really messed up, and this is what happened, because they are afraid of the consequence. Parents are still the #1 influence on whether or not their kids do drugs, but they are probably the last resort that they will go to if they are having a drug problem. So make it very open and honest, like, there is no tolerance for drug use or alcohol use, but I want you to know that I'm here if you need me. And try your best to not give them negative feedback about it, because they're coming to you for help, as hard as that may be. There are so many layers to this, but you can do it.
Take us through, you and Jen, take us through what happens at a party if you have a child, a student who doesn't want to partake in any kind of substance at a party, some of the things they can do to take themselves out of that situation. You do it really well, Jen.
Well, Mandy and I do this together. That's why I'm looking at her, because we usually do it as a tag team little thing with mainly middle schoolers is where we're pushing this. No, it's okay. We're good, Dave. Yeah, we're good. But basically what we have been telling middle schoolers is coming up with a plan and practicing it now, especially our 7th and 8th graders entering into high school who are going to be going to their first parties. We talk about showing up to a party with something in your hands, whether we say, bring a McDonald's styrofoam cup that you can't see through. Tell them you've already got a drink. So when you're less likely to be offered a drink if you already have something in your hands. It takes one pressure off. Second thing that you can do is have code words with your parents. If you're in a tough situation, you can text your parent or call them and maybe even set up a plan. We kind of role play one where, you act like a jerk to your parent, but your parent knows why, because you want to stay cool with your friends. You get in the car, and sometimes you have this agreement, no questions asked. Just get me out of the situation, we'll talk about it later. Again, what Mandy's saying, if you want to have that open dialogue, let there be time for it to kind of process first. Your kid reached out for help, that should be good enough. Another thing we tell them is we tell kids that they can, we do the puff, puff, pass. You've got 5 seconds to decide if you're going to smoke that weed or not. And we say, there's a couple of things you can say. No thanks, I'm allergic. Because Mandy and I always talk about, your body's going to have a reaction. That's not going to be a lie. And nobody wants you to be the downer at the party with allergic reaction. So they're going to kind of move on. Another thing I use, because I'm a coach and a lot of my players say it works because they don't get asked anymore. We have an open dialogue on my team, is my coach will kill me. I got a game tomorrow. I got to get for practice. This is not something I'm interested in. I want to keep on the right track. We have people from our SAD chapters that come from the high schools that talk with us at the middle school who talk that really does work. Saying no and saying it early in your life, when you get to parties later on, they just don't ask you anymore. They let you come, and usually they're the designated driver. They joke around about that, but they're still invited to the parties. But their friends stop asking, or people that they know stop asking, because they know they're going to say no. They know that they have a different direction. So we tell kids, that just say no, it actually does work. But those are some of the things that we want kids to know or to go back to their parents and talk about, so that there are some options to get out of it. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it. I think
Okay.
that's good. So develop that code word now. And it shouldn't just be your parents. Like, maybe have 3 other people, like a neighbor or an aunt or uncle or something. A lot of kids use the letter X. Like, they'll type X in the address, and then that means that they need to come pick them up. Tell your kids that you're okay with being the jerk. So, man, my mom's being a real jerk tonight. She will not let me go to that party. And mom's in the background going, I'm a jerk. I like it. Whatever you have to do in order to get yourself out of the situation, it could work. Surround yourself with friends who also don't use. It does not mean that you will not be invited to the party. It means that you have a group of friends who you will be at the party with who are also not using. And that's awesome, because it's better in numbers. So surround yourself with those folks as well.
I'm sorry.
Hold on. Let's get other people a chance. Is there anybody up here?
And that's really no indictment on the school system. That's just the way it is. I mean, that was the case when I was in high school 45 years ago. I mean, that's just the way it is. Ma'am, did you have a question out there? Yeah, this would be the last question of the night, guys. Dave Long and some miles.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lenore Redon, and I'm fortunate to work under the leadership of Pastor Cheryl Menendez. And we also work with teens as well. We have an open dialogue with the kids as well. Everybody has everybody's cell phone number, because we find that in the home, a lot of the children have more issues in the home than they have out in the street. So you have to start at home first. That's what I wanted to say. And now I had a question for the panel. I wanted to know, how often do you guys communicate with the communities in Anne Arundel County? Because I also serve on the board at Community Action Agency as well, and we are always looking to have panels like this in the different communities. So we want to know, when would you guys have time to come out to the different communities to get your message out? Because a lot of the parents don't know, and I'm quite sure that if they knew about this event tonight, this room would have been filled.
Yeah, we've got the answer for you. Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
Well, the Not My Channel will travel to any community upon request. So you can just reach out, give me a call at the county executive's office, and we can schedule for any community association. We're at libraries, churches. We target it using the schools because we have a feeder system of 12 high schools, and the elementary, middle school all feed the high school. Just want everybody to know that when we have now been to 10 of our 12 high schools. That includes the evening presentation and the student assemblies. We've been to Broadneck Community multiple times, not at the high school, but in other settings, as well as in Severna Park, but not the high school. So when we come to the high schools, a Connect Ed goes out to every parent, elementary, middle, and high school, to let them know we were here this evening. That is done by Bob Mosier of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the public information officer. So every parent of children attending the Annapolis feeder system got a Connect Ed. Also, Mr. Mosier attaches our information flyer that we put out. That goes out to an email to the parents. It was sent to the Capitol. All our Not My Childs are sent to the Capitol in hopes that they'll put them in the paper. But all we can do is try. And we also send them out via our own newsletter that we do through Constituent Services. And actually, in addition to reaching out to Mr. Hutzel, I reach out to the community writers so they can put it in the community news. So we are trying to find every angle, every avenue we can to broadcast all our events. Yes, I can do that through the Clergy Advisory Council, yes. And actually, they're now reaching out to us because we're now going to be at St. Margaret's on Thursday night and at St. Andrew by the Bay on April 30th. So now the churches are now reaching out. So, what's that? Well, I don't have an email list for the Hispanic community.
But we have, because on some of the middle schools we've been to, when I know that night event, I have had translators from the school come so that parents could come. I've also presented the community college where we've had the school translators come, where they can wear the headphones and hear what we're saying. So it has been done at a couple of the Not My Childs when we know ahead.
Correct. Down at Southern, we actually had interpreters for the Southern event a couple of months back, and Central. So. Okay, so there are avenues at which we're using. Unfortunately, it's not my child. A lot of parents that I've met through this program, and I think Ginger would agree, parents are the last to know their child has a problem. Our children are very savvy and discreet. They have the ability to keep it hidden until it's a crisis. That's what I've learned from parents that are walking in Ginger's shoes. You know, this problem impacts all families. The best parent, you could be a hawk, you can be knocking on the doors where the parties are taking place. And if you have that child that is going to make a risky decision, sometimes it's unpreventable. All we can do is the best we can. So thank you very much.
Yeah, Nancy, thank you. We're going to, Sandy, real quick. Yeah.
Real quick, you remember I mentioned the community coalitions. You are fortunate that you have an Annapolis Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition that you can become a member of, and you can have us anytime you want to. There are plenty of experts on that coalition. The social media, we do publicize this through social media. We will come to the PCRCs. You know I've been there twice. So we publish it as much as we can.
Can I just say
Yeah, sure, Jen. And then I want to let Chief Altamari and I wrap it up with a little Q&A here.
I just wanted to acknowledge what you said because I think it got brushed over a little bit. I think we're focusing on children. There's not a school that I haven't been at that a child hasn't begged me to help their parent. There hasn't been one that I haven't left with a name or 2 sheets of paper where we've done a door knock the next day for the parent. So I thank you because we tend to focus on the children who are using, but I can't tell you how many children, the last schools that broke my heart, I must have had 4 who are not even with their family members right now because they've chose their addicted boyfriend, mothers have chose their addicted boyfriends, and they're being bounced from house to house, and they want normalcy. So thank you, because that is another piece we have to look at. It's the children who might be suffering in a home where there's addiction. So thank you.
Thank you. Chief, you and I had a great discussion before we started tonight. Even though heroin's been on the street in Baltimore City and Detroit, Chicago for a long, long time, you know, it's kind of blindsided suburban America. And now that it has, gentlemen like yourself, ladies like Jen Corbin, Governor Hogan, Steve Shue are literally writing the rules now as to how we battle this. Wes Adams is doing the same thing. Thankfully, you guys are on call for that. And I mean that as a resident and someone that's a part of this. But this is just the beginning, isn't it? This is the beginning of the discussion we talked about. And now it's up to everyone, us, them meaning the parents, to take it to the next level. Is that fair?
I'm with you 100%. We can't do it up here by ourselves, folks. The community's got to get involved, and the only way we're going to win is to fight this thing together.
Thank you, sir. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you. How about a round of applause for our unbelievable panel? Thank you. The next high school, I believe, Nancy, is Chesapeake, or next school is Chesapeake Middle? Oh, Corcoran Middle. And St. Margaret's Thursday night. Right, right. We hope to see you again at some point. Thank you for coming out again. We'll be around to talk to some specific issues if you want. And let's get the word out, guys. This thing's not going away, and we're here to help. Thank you. Have a safe trip home. And Ms. Chittum, thank you for opening your doors. We really appreciate it.